So it's old. But I need to. So I'll put that on. Like he gave me the initial question. Set it up.
They were, I saw, are they still meeting in June? John was there. No? You know, I haven't even seen her. So she might have, honestly. I haven't seen her. Usually I'll see her in the hallway.
So I'm gonna try to connect everyone. I know it's too deep, so just so you know.
Yes. And I think the good thing is since they record it, so you don't have to worry about it. Does that make sense?
We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Dr. Means, will you help us with the roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Dykeman.
Here.
Mr. Worthy.
There.
Mr. Bybee.
Here.
Ms. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Gann.
Here.
Dr. Knox.
Here.
Dr. Matthews.
Here.
Thank you. Will you please stand and join us in a silent meditation and then pledge allegiance? Thank you. Flag's over here tonight. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And thank you to the color guard for. We will begin our meeting tonight with a recognition of achievements and awards.
Good evening, Mr. President, Superintendent, and members of our Board of Education. I have the privilege of honoring one outstanding individual from the Clark County School District this evening, and our honoree is our January 2019 Better Everyday Award winner. At the October 11, 2018 board meeting, we decided to make and introduce the Better Everyday Award. The award is given monthly to one district employee who embodies our mission of ensuring equity and excellence through the implementation of rigorous standards in a safe and supportive environment for every child. This month's winner is Ann Seymour, Family and Consumer Science teacher at Hillsland Middle School. Ms. Seymour was nominated for her positive influence on students and her outside of the classroom efforts to keep students engaged. She spends her Saturday mornings at our students' extracurricular activities, such as football games. She mingles with them, talks about their opinions on upcoming class plans, and Ms. Allington, who nominated Erin, says, she has been able to keep my son engaged in class, and this is not an easy task. And gives his father and I positive updates regularly through emails. Her students love her. She makes their outlook on school much brighter and encourages them to do their best. Her attitude and persistence have really made a huge difference the past 2 years, and I feel she should be recognized for going above and beyond typical teacher duties. Congratulations, Ms. Seymour.
Congratulations again on that award. Thank you for all that you do. The next item is to amend or adopt our agenda. And I didn't receive any anything different. Is there a motion to amend or adopt the agenda?
Well, I was, there were two things I wanted to raise.
Okay.
One is that if we want to talk about the MLK
Okay.
parade, and the other thing is, and I don't know if we can do anything about this, but when the agenda is updated, we're getting a email telling us it's been updated, but I don't know how it's been updated. And so I'm going back to previous agenda, trying to figure out what's updated the last time.
Next,
Sure. Yes, Ms. Bodick, thank you.
When you get that email, if you follow the link that's in the email, it will take you directly to the agenda item that's been changed.
Okay, I did not know that. Thank you.
And the other, just to come full circle, so the other item here that Mr. Davis was talking about is the board participation. Has been invited to participate in the MLK Day Parade, and he and I talked, and that perhaps this is something we can discuss by email and put out there for anyone who wants to participate in that event. Same way that we participated in the Race of Lights. This is great. So I don't think we need any action on that tonight. That's okay. Any other any amendments to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
By Mr. Worthy, is there a second? And Ms. Dr. Maddox, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comments. We didn't receive a list of any public comments, but I do not believe we have any. Is that correct?
It was also in board docs, there are two.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Our first speaker tonight, let me read this section. Speakers will be limited to 3 timed minutes. At this point, remarks must be concluded. No speaker shall indulge in personal attacks while speaking. All comments are to be addressed directly to the Board of Education. To protect the privacy of students, speakers shall refrain from identifying specific students by name. Personal concerns may be addressed in writing to the superintendent or to the president of the Board of Education. And we have our giant clock in case anyone is keep track of the time. Our first speaker will be Dr. Frankie Hill.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Frankie Hill, Executive Director for Programs and Administrator for Feed My Sheep Ltd. Feed My Sheep is a charitable 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in 2012 by CEO Isaiah Ellis. This organization was organized in response to feeding the impoverished in the Athens area with a particular focus on the East Athens community located in the Triangle Plaza, Census Tract 302. First, I want to congratulate our 3 new Board of Education members and being appointed as the representatives for your districts, and thank you for your commitment. Secondly, I'm here to advocate for the students and families that reside in Census Tract 302. Our students attend their zone schools, Gaines, Hillsman, and Cedar Shores High School. As a result, they have been attending schools within the Census Tract community that have been labeled by the governor's office as failing schools in math and reading for several years. As a result, the academic growth of these children in comparison to other children attending exemplary schools in the state has been stifled, thereby creating greater academic disparities between these groups of children. The College and Career Ready Performance Index promulgates that our zone schools are in the bottom 5% of the state. A perpetual cycle has been created within the school system, wherein our students are being moved to the Clark County School District, regardless of whether or not the academic foundation knowledge has been mastered. These students lack basic vocabulary knowledge and comprehensive reading skills to make the narrow risk determinations, which is a major component of standardized tests that are mandated annually. For example, a rudimentary comparison of meringue to a pie could not be analogized to icing on the cake by many of our elementary students because they don't know that meringue is a topping. Many of these students enter schools with a vocabulary of less than 2,500 words than their peers. The research clearly points out that the children learn more between the ages of 2 to 6 than at any other time in their lives. I am before you tonight to encourage this Board of Education to give serious consideration to supporting Superintendent DeMonte's facility plan with a majority yes approval. This plan encompasses 2 impacted components: additional classroom and a partnership with Emory that will help us monitor our students' mental health. These proposed classrooms will create space for employing quality certificated students to develop and increase the foundational learning for impoverished students. Feed My Sheep has a garden. We plant, harvest, and give away our products in Census Tract 302. I'm suggesting tonight that a garden can be at any location, and if the present entrepreneurs want to market their goods, they can always come to the new site that will be available on Saturdays. Dr. Means has been relentless in apprising this community that our schools are functioning in a crisis state. The governor's office December report validates his assessment. We are the system, and that has to change. The policy shows that your job as board members is to support the superintendent in his responsibility to manage the day-to-day operation of the district schools. It is listed too in the Code of Ethics in Domain 3. Finally, our students know when they're being devalued. We know as stakeholders when they're being devalued. We need you as the representatives of these students to make an investment in establishing resources to increase their foundational learning.
Thank you, Dr., for your comments.
I would like to give you a copy of my remarks.
Our next speaker this evening will be Melanie Wilson.
This seemed like a good idea at the time. It may turn out to be like the scene in Jerry Maguire where he eats the bad pizza and writes a manifesto. It doesn't, didn't quite sound the same when everybody heard it, read it out loud. Probably gonna rock the world a little bit. I'm coming here more as a mom, a person who's kind of grieved. I have two girls at Clark Central, one in middle school. I want to tell you something that happened yesterday. It's by no means, it's not out of the ordinary. I got trapped in the student parking lot right when the bell let out, and I'm in that sea of cars trying to get out. There's a carload of young women in front of me, and a carload of young men in front of them. And some of them are hanging out the car, they're yelling and laughing and talking, and they turn to the girls and they say, "Follow us, we'll go smoke." As if that invitation weren't bad enough, the next one, and I'm so sorry for this, but one of the young men said to the girls, "We can go," starts with an F, ends with a K. Said it many times, very loudly. Some parents walking by, young kids, no sense of shame about it, no sense of embarrassment. There weren't any indignation on the part of the girls. I was all ready for them to be insulted. They were not. There is a coarsening of culture at my school. It kills me. I'm not even a very nice person. I'm kind of an impatient jerk most of the time. But I feel like there's got to be a way that these folks, these leaders here, we can figure out how to give kids tools they need to live a dignified life. That they belong to me. This is my school. And I know virtue is kind of passé, it's old, it's tradition, we teach recycling and stuff now. We don't need to exclude that, y'all, because what I see, and I'm in it, I volunteer, my husband does, we help coach, we do things, and what I see happening, it's just not pretty. And yeah, my kids and other kids are, they're coached enough by their parents to kind of come over here. I did hear one young man tell his grandmother when they heard it, you just have to ignore it. What do we? We better not ignore it because it's a big part of what it means to be human. Is to be dignified and to carry yourself with honor and respect other people. And respect yourself. And I don't know how y'all would address this, but I'm begging you, when you do your planning and your appropriations and you're setting the agenda, please don't forget this part. Because those kids, they need it. They need it. It's pervasive, and it's dark, and it's there, and we better look at it, or it's going to bite us all in the butt.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Excuse me. Moving on to section E of our agenda, information items. The first item is a board update, and it is with a heavy heart that I let the public know that this week we received a letter of resignation from Mr. Vernon Payne, who has been on the Clark County School District Board of Education for a very, very long time. More than 40 years, longer than I've been around. He's been sitting on the board and has been a tremendous asset to our community. And if you know much better than I do, just how much he has given in years and in expertise and in service. He has been an advocate for public education at a statewide level and served the Georgia School Board Association for a number of years. And I would like to take a minute to read his words from in the letter that he sent to us, just to give dignity to his sentiments. It says, "It is with great sadness that I submit my resignation from the Clark County Board of Education effective immediately. I've come to the realization that it is in the best interest of our precious youth education that I step down due to health reasons. While I may be stepping down, I shall continue to be concerned with the education of our youth, and therefore I will do whatever I can to continue in the support of education. There is no greater pleasure in life than to serve others. As a long-term member of the Board of Education, I've tried to give back to my community, standing alongside many other concerned citizens, trying and striving to make a difference in the young people's lives by ensuring that they are afforded an unsurpassed opportunity to receive the best possible education available to them. There are simply too many exceptional and distinctive individuals that have traveled with me on my education improvement and enhancement journey to thank individually. So I will say thanks to everyone for your unconditional support, dedication, due diligence, and prayers in making education of our youth a paramount issue, as it is and shall always remain one of our fundamental and most important societal endeavors. The Bible states that every person is given at least one talent in accordance with God's plan for that individual. These God-given talents may never come to fruition without proper education. The students that we allow to fall through the cracks or permit to be placed in an atmosphere that is not conducive to learning and reaching their full potential could be the very students that could save innumerable lives, change the world through innovation, develop numerous medical cures, and countless other life-changing advancements. However, if we fail our youth, then we also have in turn failed ourselves, as we have unknowingly stifled the many God-given talents that have been bestowed upon our youth. As active citizens purportedly always concerned about the future, our youth deserve and demand to be afforded each and every possible opportunity to reach their God-given potential. Anything less, and we should be ashamed of ourselves for settling for mediocrity, as it was simply too hard to do what was in the best interest of our youth. I'm blessed in working with so many youth education dedicated individuals, and I'm sure that in my absence, an unyielding commitment to education of our youth shall continue. I shall always remember and cherish the friendships that I have with so many fellow educators and supporters, and I shall continue to pray for God's guidance and intervention on behalf of our youth education. Very truly yours, Vernon Payne. And many of you have noticed his empty chair for some number of months, and as he has struggled with some health issues, his presence has been missed, his experience has been missed, his big heart has been missed, and we will work with his family to arrange a fitting tribute to his service on the board.
Thank you.
We have board policy on how to fill his seat, and we would like the board to call a special meeting to discuss the process for fulfilling that vacancy. We have two committee meetings this upcoming week on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, I believe. And we'd like to look at the time immediately following the Tuesday and Thursday meetings to see if we can have a special board meeting to discuss what exactly the process will be to fill the seat vacated by Mr. Payne. If you wouldn't mind pulling out your calendars to let us know whether a meeting at Tuesday at 6 p.m. after the policy committee.
That's on Monday.
On Monday.
Government relations.
Government relations is Tuesday. So it will be after government relations meeting on Tuesday, so approximately 6 p.m. to begin that. Is there anyone that does not work for?
That's the 15th. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
15th. Okay. Good.
And then what about Thursday at 5:30? That would be after the finance committee meeting. Is there anyone that would not work for? Okay, so then let's do it on Thursday at 5:30. A special called meeting, and this will be to discuss the process by which we will fill the vacancy left by Mr. Green.
So is that final gonna be Thursday?
Thursday at 5:30. Any questions about that? Thank you. Moving on in our agenda, we received a number of information items that were a part of our packet and discussed at the work session. This is early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and reports, as well as a SPLOST report, Athens Community Career Academy report, and a Parent Advisory Board report. Any outstanding comments or questions around those? Then moving on to, in our agenda, to item F, Board of Education Committee reports. First here from the Finance Committee.
Don't have anything. I think you just mentioned that we're gonna have a call meeting next Thursday at 5:30, and of course, the Finance Committee meeting is also next Thursday. Am I correct on that, Ms. Monica?
Yes, 4:30 on Thursday.
4:30 on next Thursday, Finance Committee meeting on that date.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the Government Relations Committee.
Thank you. On January 31st, this board will be having a town hall forum on our legislative agenda. And this is something that can be located on our website underneath the board tab. We have 6 items that we've identified as what would benefit children in Clark County. And we specifically drew up these 6 items because they all involve the legislature and the governor. And so we really invite you to look on our website and look at this document. And please come and invite your neighbors and friends and family to come. This will to our town hall on the 31st. It's going to be in the Oglethorpe Elementary School cafeteria. It's going to be at 6 o'clock. It's going to go on until 7:30. This is going to be a board directive. We're not asking the superintendent to come forward. This will be folks who you've elected to be up here tonight. Speaking to board members, what I would like to do is encourage. We have 6 different legislative items, and I know one board member said that she is unable to participate, but a couple board members have said they will participate, and then the other board members will let me know which item of the legislative agenda that they would like to present to the public. That would be very beneficial. What we're talking about is about a 5-minute presentation by 6 board members on these topics, followed by a discussion for the community in terms of what the community thinks of our different aspects of our legislative agenda. We're talking about early childhood education that was spoken to earlier. We're talking about fully funding QBE. We're talking about providing post-secondary education financing for students who are low income. We're talking about addressing the needs of teachers, both in terms of class size and in terms of pay scale from the state level, so that we can retain good qualified teachers in our classrooms. So those are some of our agenda items. And so again, you can find them on our website, under the board, the tab for the legislative agenda. So, I would like to invite any board members at this time to, if they've already kind of committed themselves to what they're willing to participate and be a part of this.
Greg, I'll be able to make it as well. Is there any other board members that plan on being there? Let Mr. Davis know.
Yeah.
So that's
That's on the 30th, 31st at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
available now.
You be able to make it?
Yeah, I'll be.
So I think at 1, 2, 3, 4, I think we have.
six.
And if we could post that, just, that's enough for a meeting. So if we can make sure that we get that posted, so that we don't run afoul of any of our open meeting laws obligations, that'd be fantastic.
And then I will say that the Government Relations Committee will meet on 4:30 on Tuesday, and we will flesh out these particular topics. And but what we will also do is talk about, and we would, people from the community want to attend this meeting and help us do this, what to do after this presentation. In other words, what's important is not just laying out what the legislative agenda is, but how do we keep the public notified about what's happening in the state legislature that affects children. I know today someone said that there was a bill last year on ensuring that students have recess. Now that's an issue that people in this community have been concerned about. But the contacting of our legislators on that was not strong. And I think that we don't always continue following these issues once they get to the floor of the legislature for a vote. And so, again, I encourage, the word is out, and so we just want to broadcast our town hall meeting on the 31st of January at the Oglethorpe Elementary School cafeteria. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you, Mr. Davis. And the committee has done a really good job of staying up to date and engaged with the legislative issues that affect education, and not just the hot button ones that come up and are explosive, but the day to day, really pushing in an effective way. The next report from the policy committee.
Yes, I'm the incoming chair of the policy committee. We will be having a meeting on Monday, January 14th at 4 o'clock here in the Student Center. A lot of that will be orientation for new policy committee members. We have 3 new policy committee members, and we have 3 policies in old business that will come up. Policy GBO, professional personnel resignation, policy BBFBC, board engagement with community organizations, and policy BHAA, board statement of norms. And so that will be the main meat of that meeting. And so encourage board members to attend, whether or not you're on the committee, you can still attend, and hope to see all the committee members there.
Great, thank you. And finally, our property committee.
I am the new chairperson for the property committee, but I haven't scheduled a meeting, but I know the superintendent indicated to us that we probably gonna have far more meetings on the property committee meeting this year than usual, but I'll keep you informed on when that will take place.
Thank you. And moving on to item G, board community committees. As many of you know, the school board, members of the school board serve on committees beyond our standing committees here. So these are committees out in the public in a variety of roles. And at our last meeting, we decided on our committee assignments for this upcoming year. So many of these are very, very new roles for folks. But the first committee is the Athens Area Community Foundation. And that is, yes. Very good. Other than you're excited about being on the committee, yes. The next committee is the Community Oversight Committee, which I sit on as well as Dr. Maddox. I missed this last meeting, which we had earlier this week. Is that something that you attended? Okay, that's fine. Mr. Davis.
I did.
Mr. Davis did. As our honorary member, is there anything that from that committee? I mean, I know we just had the ribbon cutting for our cosmetology center here, which we've been working on for quite some time to rave reviews. Anything else from that? Any other highlights from that?
Just a few things. And I'm assuming it's because of the rain, the completion of Core Middle School and VHL were a few weeks behind, but they should be finishing up, I think, this week. Dr. Means?
The construction of both coil and HL will be completed in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. And then the Hillsman is, Hillsman construction is proceeding, but it's being a little bit held back because of the rain. And so, but it's going up for those of us who live on the east side.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you for covering for us. The next committee, our representative is not new, on the Vision Athens.
We had a great gala. We had our quarterly meeting today, or bi-monthly meeting today, and we meet at this is the water Snipes building, where the water filtration plant is. Those meetings are always today is what, second Thursday at 8:30. So it's open to the public, anyone can attend. And at that meeting, it's the Implementation Oversight Committee. This week or this month, we had a discussion to just take a look at where we are with the initiatives from Envision Athens. We looked at a report card that will be coming out to the public really soon. And we talked about moving forward, and it's a good model for having community engagement across the business industry, and our private sector as well as our public sector nonprofits. And we feel good about it so far, but we are also soliciting input from the public in terms of have we met our objective on some of those things. I'm really excited that we actually have one initiative that is complete, and I think that's a major kudos for the arts and culture section. Their first priority is already completed, and they're moving on to the next priority. So we really like the way it's moving from our perspective. We have an awesome oversight with Aaron Marger, who is the project manager, who keeps everybody up to date on everything. And Envision Athens is your vision being materialized, and it is thoroughly documented on the Envision Athens website. Our work plan is there, progress to date is there, opportunities are there. It's all on that website. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And if somebody wants to have a tour of that, I'll be happy to walk through it with anyone that's interested. That's about it.
Thank you. And the next committee is the Foundation for Excellence in Public Education, of which I am the new board representative. And having not attended any meetings yet, I have nothing to report. Except that it's a fantastic organization, and I'm excited to be supportive of it. And finally, the Georgia School Board Association. Georgia School Board Association, as I would say that. And Dr. Camp is our new representative. I assume nothing to report, is that right?
Nope, nothing to report yet.
We're excited to have you on there. Moving on then to item H, minutes of previous meetings. We received minutes from our regular meeting, December 13th, 2018. Which discussed at our work session. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? We'll go to Ms. Davis, in a second. Second by Dr. Duckman, thank you very much. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item I, these are policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted for public comment for 4 weeks. Now we'll read through this list of items we have to be posted. This is policy GAEB harassment. Exhibit GAEBE1 employee harassment investigation checklist. Exhibit GAEBE2 employee harassment complaint form. Exhibit GAEBE3 employee harassment complaint investigation report. Regulation GAEBR1 the harassment review to be reviewed. Policy GAF staff student relations. Policy GAMA drug-free workplace. Regulation GAMA R1 drug-free workplace. Policy GBD professional personnel hiring. Policy GBKA professional personnel layoff. Regulation GBKA R1 professional personnel layoff. Policy GBT professional publishing. Policy JAA equal educational opportunities. Exhibit JAA-E1 student harassment investigation checklist. Exhibit JAA-E2 student harassment complaint form. Exhibit JAA-E3 student harassment complaint investigation report. And finally, regulation JAA-R1 equal educational opportunities. It's a long list, and all these, you'll notice that some of them are to be revised, some of them are just under review, and all these to be put out to the public for comment and review for the next 4 weeks. And so we, if this passes to be published, then we welcome public comment on any of these. Is there a motion to put these out there? Yes.
Mr. President, I move that we post these policies and also regulations for 4 weeks for public review.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We have no items under item J, policies to adopt or rescind, so we'll move on to item K, the superintendent's report. Dr. Means.
I have no report this evening, sir.
And I have a comment. We had a number of questions that came up in our work session last week. And I wanted to say thank you. I didn't get a chance to do that to the superintendent and the staff for getting those answers to us quickly and succinctly. I'm just absolutely in board documentation heaven right now. I just got so much picture, electronic copies and stuff, and I love the audit trail that it's producing. So I really, really appreciate the thoroughness with which you investigate things and get back to us.
Thank you. And the team in back of me deserves all the credit there.
So to
They're
the
fine
team,
too.
thank you. I bought you guys a box of chocolates, but I have eaten all of them. And what they were awesome.
If any members of the public are not familiar with board documentation heaven, it is a fantastic place to be. Moving on then to item L, this is the consent agenda. We have a number of items that have been included in our consent agenda. I'll just briefly read through these. This is approval of overnight field trips, approve annual Head Start, Early Head Start program governance plan, approve the intent to apply for pre-K annual grant, approve Head Start, Early Head Start intent to submit 2018-19 grant amendment, approve fuel contract to Boswell Oil Company, approve 2019 work session and regular board meeting dates. And those are all part of our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Mr. Worthy, thank you very much.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Maddox, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Moving on to item M, other agenda items. The first item is to approve the resolution on legal services. This was discussed in our work session. Is there a motion?
I move that we do approve the resolution to pursue a change legislatively to allow us to go to a 3-year contract for our legal services.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Worthy, thank you very much. discussion. We discussed a fair bit at the work session and received some updated information. I want to give the board members time to ask any additional questions, or Dr. Means, if you want to provide any additional information. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. Based on the feedback that we got, I think this afternoon about the different districts and their different practices, I only saw one, Barrow County, that had a 3-year contract. Others were either annual or no contract, I believe. So I guess I'm struggling here with what is the rationale for the 3-year contract to be different from most of the districts that are in our area?
And again, to be clear, this would not change our policy on contract per se. This would give us the flexibility to adopt a different time frame than we currently have. So the way I read this is asking for the flexibility. The decision is still ours, whether we put out RFPs for 1 year, for a year and a half, for 19 months, whatever we'd like to do. What this is asking to do is give us the flexibility as opposed to having the ceiling imposed as it currently sits. That's my interpretation. Yes.
When I reviewed it, the action steps, to me, is saying that we're going to keep moving with what going past the resolution, we'll continue to move with the 3-year. That's what I'm understanding this based on what I'm reading. Now, I don't see flexibility in that, in what I read.
So let's open it up.
Did I understand this correctly? It's not something that we can choose as a board to vote to change it. We have to go back to the state legislature to get permission to make this a 3-year agreement. And that's what this was about. Can we go to the state legislature to get a 3-year, to ask for a 3-year agreement?
To revisit what we discussed last week,
Yes.
the recommendation is for the board to consider passing a resolution to go before the Georgia State Legislature to just receive the permission to even consider having a multi-year contract with a legal firm. If the Georgia Legislature says, yes, they're willing to approve it, then this board has to then decide if that's a step you want to actually do or not. I think Dr. Knox's observation of our survey of area districts is very clear. There's only one district, which is Barrow, that has a multi-year contract for legal services. So you may decide this evening not to proceed with this, and that's what you saw in the documentation. There's 2 different options you have. You could reject this evening, and then we will just continue to submit our annual bids. You also requested, and you have received, the number of responses that come to this district on an annual basis, based on the RFP on an annual cycle. And you also received, Mr. Davis asked a question regarding what are districts doing in terms of the number of firms they employ. As we discussed last week, we believe that this would make legal services more efficient. But we also, I think you had healthy conversation on the pros and cons of this resolution. You may decide not to move forward with it, which is healthy.
I also read in the feedback that was provided to us, there are districts that do not have time limits on their contracts at all. So not only do you have only one other that had a 3-year time limit, you had about 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken, that don't even have a time limit. And so the other thing that was interesting to me, because I'm a big history buff, is that, we've kind of been with the same firm for however many years, since 1955. That's a long time. And so we've had a lot of relationships over those years that we've either come to cherish and depend on and rely on. And so I think that there's a bigger question, as you're indicating, Dr. Knox, do we need to make a change at all? And what should that change be? So I would take us to another step and say, well, what drives this decision? What is the work that we are engaging our council with that would dictate whether we should go to a multi-year contract, no contract, or stay where we are? And I think that's the conversation the board would need to have. I think to give the district permission well, not the district actually, we have our legal counsel permission to pursue this with the legislators to give us some flexibility in that final implementation of the decision. It's a timely thing to do. I think that we've already seen what it's like to have to go through this RFP process. It's not a yearly cycle, it's a 9-month cycle where we're constantly doing RFPs on the things that we must do to meet legal requirements to exist as a district. And so some of that should probably be pretty routine by now. And I think we have enough history to know that. So for that reason, I'm still in favor of us asking for that relief from doing this every 3 years, based on the benefits that were provided in the documentation that we received.
Yes, Dr. Gator.
From what I can tell with the next steps, if the Board of Education approves the proposed resolution, that the RFP that goes out would then be reflective of that. Is that correct?
Dr. Means.
I think from a process standpoint, yes, we would want to leverage the approval of and the flexibility of a multi-year contract versus the annual, because if you remember, Dr. Gant, there was a question around how many responses have we received for the annual response. And as Ms. Davis has indicated, typically when you have the annual responses, you kind of lock yourself in on certain firms who are going to bid on the services because they know, as you said, that runway of every 9 months or so is fairly tight. I think in terms of the actual quantity of years is something that the board, if you remember what we just discussed at the work session, I suggested that there would be some type of conversation between the board and administration to not only restructure that RFP, so if there are certain components of legal services you want, we can include in the RFP, but also we can determine for sure how long you want it to be. There was discussion of how long it should be. Should it be 3 years, 5 years? And so I think the barrel model of 3 years is, and we discussed that a little bit last week as well. 3 years seemed to be an appropriate frame. But yes, that's a long answer to the next step is for the RFP to go out, but you remember we discussed the structuring of that RFP would be a collaborative process.
Yes, Dr. Maddox.
Thank you for clarifying. That's exactly what I meant. The 3 years, I didn't mistake that, but yes, as I read that, I understood it to be that we would be actually locked into the 3 years that, and so thank you, Dr. Gann.
So there's clarity that that it is not like locked in per se. That would be the RFP discussion would determine what we're putting out there into the world. And I read, I agree with you, Dr. Knox's survey was helpful to see kind of what else is out there. And I also noticed that several boards don't have any contact at all. And so there's, it's a useful to gather that data. But it's also, I don't take too much heart into it because they're not us, right? They're doing things. And I was reminded, Mr. Pruitt and I both missed the meeting last week. I watched all 3 hours. Did you?
Absolutely.
Okay. But your colleague at the meeting made a comment about the legal obligation and your duty as an attorney as it relates to a contract for legal services. Is that something you could? That idea is something you could review?
Yes, sir. And I wanted to jump in and clarify that. So you are not locked in now, and you cannot be locked in. You cannot. Not by what you pass tonight or any point in the future. The state bar rules, as well as case law, state that a client must be free to terminate legal representation at any time the client wishes. So that's why you will find the vast majority of school districts, as well as other local government agencies, do not have contracts with their attorney. Once the attorney is hired, the attorney is there unless and until a majority of the board decides to terminate their representation. RFPs typically go out when there's a need for a new attorney, either because the current one has died, retired, moved, declined to provide services any further, or the board has, there's been some reason that the board is not satisfied with those services. What you're passing tonight would remove a small provision from your charter that requires annual bidding for legal services. That's all. Representation, once that's done, representation will continue again unless and until a majority of the board determines to terminate that representation and seek other counsel. I can tell you, I don't think anybody is served well by this annual bidding process. It obviously puts your current law firm sort of in a constant running for reelection mode. Whereas if there is actual some reason to discuss different representation, and that should arise organically so that there are discussions between council and the board so that we determine if we solve the problem or is it time to part ways. It does not serve the board well for a couple of reasons. One, typically you bid out things that are project specific. Sometimes the legal services are project specific. Litigation. You hire a lawyer for a particular case. Now typically you don't have to do that because counsel is provided through your risk management fund and the ACCG. Architects, contractors, those sorts of things are project specific. General counsel services, everything's moving all the time. So even if there were a point at which you wanted to switch counsel, it probably would not conveniently be at December 31st because there would be better times when there are less balls up in the air than others. And the main reason I think it really doesn't serve the client well is that I can tell you when big law firms look at RFPs that are published in papers and whatnot, and the first question is always, is this just something being routine, or are they really looking for a new lawyer? We don't bid if it's routine. We just don't bother with it. But if it's something that's being done for a specific reason, then sure, we'll put our names in the hat. So I wanted to clarify that. You cannot lock yourselves in if you want to.
Thank you. And I did notice that in terms of the bids we received, aside from our current law firm, there was no law firm that put in more than one bid. It was just sort of a once, they tried once and that was about it. Yes, I struggle seeing folks on this side. Mr. Davis will show you the ropes on how to get my attention, but I appreciate your patience. Yes?
I just did.
Dr. Wagner, thank you.
So thank you for clarifying that, and some of the questions that I had, and it might just be because it's in, so is it in our charter right now that we have a 1-year contract? And so we have to have a contract at all?
It's in our charter that we are required to put out to bid on an annual basis legal services.
Okay, so I know, and your colleague had mentioned last week as well, that a lot of this has to do with the idea of having to every year do the RFP, and I agree that doesn't make a ton of sense, nor is it a great use of your time. And I guess I wondered, and that this probably has to do with the contract, is there a way of not extending the contract, but also not making you do an RFP every year? Or is that what we're asking for? Are we asking for the removal of having them have to do the RFP?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Anybody else from the back side of my face? Okay. Dr. Knox, yes.
Just for clarification, we talked last week about how this was a little broader in terms of professional services. And so this change would also open the door to multi-year contract for other kinds of professional services. So that was my understanding.
Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. It does apply to all professional services.
And we'll dig up in that list of the professional services that we currently have, right? We talked about those.
There was some discussion. One thing I would like to ask, maybe point out about the previous RFPs is, it is my recollection, I'm still fairly new on the board, that some of those RFPs went out relatively late. And so I don't know, we didn't ask specifically for information on when the RFPs went out, so I don't know if that information is available. Going back to 2014 or so, that was what I understood. So I'm not sure if the number of proposals received is reflective of what could have happened in other circumstances. But that's really more secondhand information.
So we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. We're in the middle of a conversation and heading towards a vote.
Yeah, I just heard something I wasn't aware of. So I focused on legal services on this petition for the legislature. Are we talking about more than that?
Administration is now making a recommendation to extend professional services beyond what's in front of you right now, which is legal. I think the retainer model for architectural services needs to go with would be, it has the potential to be multi-year as well. Or it's those two professional services. Everything else, if we have been on a cycle of annually putting out for bid, we're suggesting that we should continue that cycle.
Do we have other, I don't think I have a clear grasp of, do we have other professional services out there that I'm just clueless to?
So I guess the best example is alternative school.
Right, although that's not really a licensed profession. This provision.
That's not a professional service.
Right. This is strictly talking about, requiring this provision in your charter that locks you in to do annual RFPs for professional services that are licensed by the state of Georgia, which some question is whether that even covers attorneys or not, but that aside, it's just releasing yourself from having to do it every year. You still do it every year if you want to do it. You can do it every 6 months. And again, it relates to lawyers. If we have a contract, it's strictly one way. You can lock me in, or my firm in, to a rate structure for a certain period of time by contract. But we can't lock you in to hold you as your counsel to the end of that term.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned about what is not stated at this time.
So that was part of our conversation last week, and we made it through talking about, that's what, when Dr. Gann actually brought up teachers and their contracts, and so that was a part of the information packet that we got today, or this afternoon, in terms of the research done by staff. We talked about the security, I think that was one of those professional services contracts as well, and so we fleshed it out pretty well. I'm not sure that there's more to say about it, I guess. I'm trying to understand what the unreadiness is.
And it sounds like from Dr. Means that it's your recommend if we not only if we pass this this resolution, but also if we get the permission that we're requesting, that to the extent other professional services are coming through, that your RFPs are going to reflect a 1-year term and not some open-ended term.
Correct.
Is that right? And again, these are all of these are above the $80,000 limit, so we're always going to see these. They're always going to come across in our agenda because they meet that threshold limit. Now, Dr. Gann had something that she wanted to ask. Are you okay?
Yeah, let me get it together first. I think that's all.
Okay.
I want to join.
Yes, Dr. Mathis.
I know we flushed out a lot last week, but still, when we talk about going into the architectural contract, if we do the legal and that's rolled into the same thing for the architectural firms, that's not what I'm saying, but that's not what we just said.
So we already have multi-year contracts for construction. For whatever reason, it's different. So that's, yeah.
And we get that opportunity to have that full-fledged conversation.
I'm still, I'm looking at the stuff that was out. I didn't have a chance. I reviewed this, and that's what I was talking about. I reviewed stuff prior to this afternoon, so I may not be up on it. But Linda, you're saying there is a list of the professional services that we give. Was that in the email today?
Just the answers to the questions that we gave staff last week in terms of responding to people's readiness to move this to consent. We took it off of consent so that we could have this conversation. I'm just remembering from that discussion that the question came up about teachers because they're professionally licensed under the state of Georgia, and can they have more than a multi-year contract? And the answer is no. Theirs has to be done annually, so they are not covered under this waiver if we get this waiver, or if we get this change to our charter. We talked about the SRO. I think that was one of the other contracts that we talked about. And that led to that whole discussion of what does the contract look like. And so you have that entire contract in the package that the staff provided to us, maybe this afternoon. It's about 7 pages long.
So the SROs would be part of the 3-year.
No, they're not.
Okay,
So
well, that's
those
what
were-
I'm-
but my point is, those were the contracts that we brought up. As
I know that, but I
the
thought you
staff's
were moving to
answer,
other.
this is where those actually lie. So that, nothing new has been identified as far as I can see.
I want to simplify something here. There's only one person in this school district with a 3-year contract, as I speak. Dr. Means.
Right. The fact says that.
And that's the law. You can't go beyond 3 years.
With employees of the district, that's right.
That's right.
But if we so chose, as the discussion's going, then we would also elevate our legal counsel to that similar.
No, because they're not employees of the district.
No, but in terms of people in the room.
Well, I think there's a couple of different options.
Which is a big distinction.
I think there's other options. And I think the other option could potentially be if you pass the resolution this evening, and this board then talk about how you want to proceed with legal services. You could, as we saw in the survey, you could structure it where there is no contract. And you retain counsel until you decide not to. And I think that's what Ms. Pruitt was trying to identify, that there's another model. Administration proposed a multi-year contract structure because you're used to having a contract. But there are some school districts that don't have any contract. Candidly, my experience is that there isn't a contract with legal counsel. It gets to a point where it doesn't work. It typically happens when there's a retirement of a veteran attorney who serves the board. When that person pivots away, then the board has to make a decision: are we going to go to the next person on their bench in their firm, or do we put the services out for bid to see what's out there? And I think that's, if you remember from our conversation last week, it was my recommendation that it appears that this board needs to discuss legal services in a more global perspective. With Mr. Davis asked a question, and try to gather data as much as possible, sir. So do districts have multiple firms that serve multiple purposes? In terms of student services, or we're working for the Board of Education specifically. And so administration is, excuse me, very open to having those discussions with the board. Excuse me, but the first step in the process is for you to even see if you can even have the flexibility. Right now, you don't have the flexibility of deciding if you don't want to have any contract, or you want to have a multi-year contract, because your charter states that you have to put this service out for bid on an annual basis.
And thank you for the explanation. And to be totally candid, folks, I think it's relatively small. We're asking for more flexibility for what we're doing. And this is not to discount the good conversation we've had, but in terms of the items that we're tasked with, this is on the lower level of things that we do. So I want to give it its appropriate due for sure, and then figure out, if folks are comfortable moving on or not.
I think I just have a quick, my concern is, I like the flexibility that the resolution, it seems like, would give us to, be able to do multi-year contracts. So I do like that. I think with it being put together, however, as a new board member, it's a huge learning curve is an understatement. And so with having the flexibility, but then also it looks like if we vote in that way, that is also to assume that an RFP will be released in about 2 months for a multi-year contract. And I know we have a history, I think, and that was really helpful, as far as the history with, the law firm and legal services. But I don't think, me personally, I would be equipped yet to make a decision as it relates to, what you mentioned earlier, Dr. Means, as far as even the role, so perhaps, what do we feel, constituents need, or what does our school district need? And so it sort of seems like it would sort of push us there, to, like to actually say, well, yeah, we want the flexibility, but then in a couple months, we're gonna have, maybe a multi-year contract, and I'm still trying to grasp, like, what might be the better option as far as like how legal services are used, related to the options that you mentioned last week. So that's sort of my only concern, but I do like the flexibility that it provides. And I will say, the other concern, but I don't know that, that's sort of outside of our purview, of course, is teachers and employees. And I think, we have people working with kids every day that are on year contracts that don't feel that their jobs are secure. And it does sound like one of the primary benefits of having a yearly contract or the RFP, or the primary disadvantage is that it puts the attorney, or those services, in an uncomfortable position. And so that's not anything we can solve, but that's something in my head that gives some, sort of context as far as why this is important.
Well, and from our attorney, we could decide tonight to let him go, right? So there is, it is a one-way binding thing. And perhaps what we can do is find time on our work session to carve out, where we can have an open conversation around how we engage with legal services, because we have a couple of questions around contract or no contract, how long the contract. You all talked last week also about, multiple attorneys versus one attorney. So we have a fair amount to discuss there, all of which is a little bit separate than this issue. But I think if we can carve out time in a work session to have that fuller conversation around how we engage with legal services, and before an RFP, a multi-year RFP goes out, I think that would be a reasonable way to do it.
We can make that happen.
Yes.
And this is more of a question just because I'm new also. But so on the agenda is a requested action. So it talks about what is requested of the board, and there are some things listed there, but some of those things seem different than some of the things we've been talking about. And you've been saying that there's some flexibility in how we might restructure it. So my question was, if we are voting in favor of this, are we voting for the things that are listed here? Or are we voting for the things that we're talking?
The only thing you're voting for this evening is to pass the resolution to then go to the Georgia legislature. That's it. The rest of the steps are steps that can be scheduled and discussed at a later date.
So for example, we would be voting to go to the legislature, but we wouldn't be voting for what we're asking the legislature specifically.
The resolution is very clear that it's requesting flexibility from the provision in your charter, in the district's charter, of having to place out for bid on an annual basis professional services. That's what you're being asked to consider and to pass the resolution.
It's delete subsection D, and then read letter E to D, and change the references into the subsection E with the subsection A, B, and C. So it's just delete section B and then make it all work.
Section D.
Delete subsection D. That's all. And that subsection is what requires professional services to bid annually.
And we would still have to vote on the RFP and approve the RFP, and then vote on the selection made by the RFP process when it is time to review this contract. So none of that stops. The only thing that stops here is the prohibition of having to do it every year. That's the action.
So we have a motion on the floor to approve this resolution. We've had a second, some fantastic discussion. I think we have for a future work session to flesh out this conversation around how we use legal services before any future RFP goes out. If it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and call for a vote then on the motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, abstained? Thank you. Sorry, who were the 4 votes in favor of?
No, I voted in favor.
In favor of, okay, thank you. Did you get all those?
So, I'm sorry,
6 to 2, yes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2, approve school resource officer annual agreement.
Mr. President, board members, there was a request for additional information regarding training of SROs. It was submitted to the board this morning.
There was an email that came around 9:58 this morning to have a lot of that new information. And thank you again for providing that. Is there a motion on the SRO annual agreement? Yes.
I second it.
Move to approve the annual agreement.
Yes.
I will second.
Is there a second to that? Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any additional questions on the SRO annual agreement?
What I wanted to do is just kind of take this opportunity. By the time that I got this stuff from Dr. Means' office, I had done some research myself. And I am impressed with the training that our SROs are getting. It is 80 hours of training on the summer. And it includes gang awareness, drug awareness, crisis intervention, mental health, active shooter, and a lot of, adolescent mental health. I had originally pulled this from the agenda because of the National Association of School Board Resource Officers also have a training in Beach City. But anyway, in the summertime. But this is obviously, there is only 40 hours. But they do have one, this National Association of School Resource Officers does have a special mental health workshop, which is not convenient for us because it's too far away. It's not in the state. But I just put out there that I think that the importance of making sure that I was, hopefully our resource officers are getting ongoing training, particularly in terms of how do you work with adolescents. And, so I guess that would be my only question, if there is ongoing training. I know we do that with teachers during the course of the year and principals and that type of thing. If there's ongoing training that's done, not just in terms of weapons training, things like that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Davis, board members, Dr. Myers and I discussed this issue earlier today. ACCPD is offering a training on how to handle mental health issues in the community on February 20th. There are a total of 30 seats available for that training. We will be sending 5 individuals to that training with the specific lens of identifying how can we craft that training for our staff, including all of our CCSD police officers and SROs. And we're hoping to engage ACCPD to offer a special training for our staff either in March or April. We understand that not only SROs and CCSD police officers, but in many cases, administrative assistants who are the first greeters in office, or bus drivers, food service workers. Those are individuals who are firsthand dealing with, in some kind of cases, mental health issues. So we understand that that's a training issue that we need to address, and it's being, we're trying to problem solve around how to provide that professional learning for people.
Great.
Fantastic.
With
Thank you for that additional information.
with the descriptions of the courses for the school resource officers, I see listed, restraint and seclusion. And this particular contract is for like police, or I'm not sure of the official term, like post certified, not for the school security guards, but the, police officers. What is the restraint and seclusion like curriculum? I'm asking from the standpoint of, I know like we have, officers in our middle schools and high schools, and sometimes things can get pretty rowdy or as far as fighting, but also figuring out how to prioritize safety when students do have to be physically restrained. So what does that course, how often is that course, and what is the course?
I'm not familiar with this particular course, but annually we have restraint and seclusion training to aid both the unarmed security officers as well as police officers in addressing fights and aggressive situations using the best way we can, try to de-escalate it without physically restraining it. When we do it in the safest way.
So, I think another way of asking the question is, so what's the protocol if ACCPD SROs? And because I think that's a distinction we should make, that the SROs are an extension of ACCPD, and then the district hires its own police officers. So what is the protocol, since you're still fairly familiar with ACCPD protocol? What is the protocol for ACCPD officer if they have to seclude or restrain one of our students on site? What techniques do they use? How far do they go? I think that maybe that's what you're asking.
Yeah, because I would imagine that it's probably quite different than people who are either not armed or teachers, of course, that there's maybe a different type of thing or approach that's used. And so, like, even, of course, even if you like don't know tonight, I was just hoping you could sort of point us in that direction, at some point, so we could take a look. Not that I expect the police department to change its approach to restraints, people, but I was just more curious about it.
Well, the first effort would just be for presence. We're at the scene. One of the great things that I know past experience that we have in the school is teachers and staff to help with those things. One of the important parts about the SRO program is them having a relationship with the kids. So often they can, just a presence can do that, but if it doesn't come to that, again, they want to do it in the safest way possible.
We'll follow up with some more information. I think I understand exactly what your question is. I think your question is that if, and I use him as an example because we should all try to distinguish the difference here. What you're approving this evening is to hire officers from ACCPD to serve as school resource officers. But the Clark County School District also hires officers. And so one of those officers is someone that is beloved in the community, Terry Reed, right? So how does Terry Reed approach seclusion and restraint versus if an SRO or a ACCPD officer is called to a school site and they have to restrain and seclude someone? Are there different protocols and procedures being used? I think that's your question.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect it, of course, to be exactly the same, but I think the bigger context is like in the high schools when there may be a combination of like SROs and unarmed security. I'm just sort of thinking, how can we at least position the student and that non-SRO officer, as well as the SRO officer, how can we at least prioritize sort of the safety and try to de-escalate that? And maybe this is not relevant here because it's the SROs, but I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of also those security officers who are not SROs. If these officers have seclusion and restraint training, at some point, might it be a good idea, or maybe to revisit at some point, hold a separate meeting, to look at what those unarmed officers do so that they can work sort of smoothly together, you know, to prioritize safety when a fight breaks out, or, you know, or something like that.
So that's a different layer to your question, right? So I think we can come back to you and share with you in writing what we did this morning in terms of what is the training process for seclusion and restraint for all of our employees. So just last week, we trained many of our principals, because candidly, on the staff side, our building principals are the first ones who have to seclude and restrain. But I'm interested in your question in that boards of education across the country have had a deeper conversation around, so what are we going to allow in regards to seclusion and restraint when police hit our campus in terms of how they're going to deal with our kids, right? So, for example, there's some school boards who would say, you can't use your traditional handcuffs on our kids. So even if a child is out of control, even if you have to restrain them and eventually arrest them, there should be some type of process that we as a Board of Education need to weigh in on. I thought that was the direction you may be going, and I think that is a conversation that boards of education nationally have had in the past. And so if that's the direction you're going, I think that's clearly a work session topic for the future. Right?
And this is a fantastic, thank you for this question, Dr. Gann. This is a fantastic example of how we have agenda items come up, and they come up for a particular reason, but they can spark all sorts of debate and conversation for a variety of reasons, right? So this particular item is coming up because it meets this $80,000 threshold where we get to approve, but they can spark great questions and conversation that we can give the superintendent an opportunity to fully flesh out. So if we want to have a conversation around restraint particularly, or school safety in general, we can decide that as a board and task our superintendent and his staff with helping us understand the current status of those things, and then have fuller, more in-depth conversation than is permitted within the time constraints of discussing a contract. So thank you for that. We have a motion and a second to approve the contract. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
We want to thank our colleagues at ACCPD for this ongoing relationship.
Absolutely.
I know Mr. Davis and the Government Relations Committee have asked in the past what type of ongoing partnerships and relationships do we have with county government. This is one of the shining examples of a good relationship.
Yes, thank you. The next item is under section M. Is item 3, approve Lindsay Pope Brayfield and Clifford as architectural firm on retainer. Dr. Means, I know you provided some additional information. Any additional information or?
Mr. Goldworth and I hope that some of the flow chart items and other information provided will help the board in your deliberation. But ultimately, we're seeking to place architectural services on retainer versus on a project-by-project basis.
Great, thank you.
And we identified that on small projects, and we gave a list to the board of small projects that are slated for this spring and summer, that if you put out to bid architectural services on a project-by-project basis, it could delay the project 1 to 3 months in some cases.
Thank you.
That was helpful to have that list of the more immediate needs out there. And I did read in the RFP that there is a line item for community engagement, and it is not defined narrowly. So I'm pretty much content now that we have space to have the conversation.
We have a recommendation to approve Lindsay Pope, Rayfield and Clifford as an architectural firm on retainer. Is there a motion in support of this?
Yes, I move that we approve this item on Lindsay, Pope, Rayfield, Clifford, architecture firm on retainer.
Thank you, Mr. Worthy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Second by Ms. Davis. Any additional questions or discussion? Yes.
So we talked about this a lot last week, and this motion is to approve this specific firm for this, or to have them on retainer, but I guess my question was this something that the board had input onto prior to posting the RFP, whether we wanted to have somebody on retainer at all? Because I feel like that was the bigger question. I don't think the problem was that this specific firm. It looked like from all of the reviews that this firm was above the others. A lot of the questions had to do with whether we wanted to do this at all. Have one architectural firm on. So I guess that was my question.
Thank you. Dr. Means, any additional insight on to Dr. Beckman's question?
I don't understand the question.
Well, so we just spent a lot of time talking about whether we wanted to maybe change to have legal services on a multi-year contract, and that was in general and not specific to one legal firm. And I think we had a lot of conversation about that. And I wondered if there was a similar conversation asking about whether we wanted to have an architectural firm on retainer at an earlier date before getting to the point of selecting one particular firm.
No, our SPLOST department brought forth a recommendation to my office stating that it would be most efficient for their operations to have a architectural firm on retainer. We then released the RFP, and then per policy, it's coming before you due to the dollar threshold. That's typically where the board then gets engaged and has the ability to either approve or reject a recommendation.
And my other question was whether that was something that typically was asked ahead of time. So I mean, I don't know.
So I think that's Dr. Dickman. I think that's probably that helps clarify. I think I understand your question a little bit more now. So typically, no, this wouldn't be something that this is not the type of topic that would typically come before the board to ask how you want to proceed. I think legal services is a little different because there's such a intersection between the board's work and legal services. It's rare that the board engages with architectural services. I think that's why Ms. Davis's questions around, so how can we make sure that there's collaboration and partnership with the firm and our children was so important. That's probably the extent to where the board would engage and be involved in this process. Other than approving or rejecting.
And I guess my question really came from the fact that most of our discussion was about whether or not we wanted to have any firm on retainer at all. And now we already have people who have applied through the RFP, and so this is the point at which we get to approve them. But it seems like if we decided we didn't want to approve them, that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but this was based on the conversation, or how I thought the conversation was going, that it wouldn't necessarily be that we didn't want these people, but it was that the board didn't like the idea of it in the first place. So to me, it seemed like it would be beneficial to make that decision before the RFP went out. And that might not be the way that it's typically done, but if I were the architectural firm and I answered an RFP for a particular project and then I was the top one, but then it was like, yeah, but we don't want to do this anyway, I would feel like that was a waste of time and something that could have been decided before the RFP went out.
And typically, Right, and so typically, we as a board will receive the contracts above $8,000 to vote yes or no. And then the management of contracts below $8,000 and the management of receiving contracts in that above $80,000 threshold. So the whole management side of RFPs going out and being considered and all that, yeah, they typically reside with the superintendent and his staff in the administration of, executing all the business of the district. And so this typically is that, from a board perspective, this is that place where we come in and vote yes or no based on kind of what they lay in front of us. And so we rely on them to make good, smart decisions on what contracts they bring out, what RFPs they put out there. And we review the superintendent, and he reviews his staff on how successful they are in executing those obligations.
I totally understand your question now, so thank you for allowing me to process. It's unusual, and I think it's unusual for staff to bring to the board a concept of going to RFP before actually releasing the RFP. Typically what happens is that staff does its job, releases an RFP, and if it meets the threshold per policy, then we bring the recommendation through that RFP selection process to the board. That's the usual concept. And so yes, you're right. It places the board in a situation where you're being requested to either accept, approve, or reject the recommendation brought before you.
But sometimes, yeah, you're right, it sometimes does create little funny interactions perhaps, but it's ends up being kind of the thing you gotta do. That makes sense. Any other questions around this item?
Based on our discussion last week, I just don't feel good about it. And that's me thinking about the community as a whole, thinking about our children, thinking about our parents, I know it sounds a little left-sided, but, with firms, definitely from other places, getting multi-million-dollar, contracts. And I guess that's why it doesn't sit well with me when we have parents not working, we have, minorities, I know we don't want to say that, but we have people in the city who need work. And, I would just like for us to have a bigger discussion around, contracting maybe out of with our lines of command, but still I think there needs to be a better discussion about our contracts and what firms, what we are asking in our RFPs when it comes to community engagement and, hiring. I know there may be some legal grounds, but we have firms getting contracts for years, 30 years, 40 years. How is that definitely benefiting the people in our community, our families, and our children?
Yeah, briefly. A couple different hands. Yes, Mr. Wood, very briefly.
Okay, this is SPLOS 5, and I've been involved in SPLOSs ever since we started in the building of Cedar Shores High School. Architectural firms, contractors, etc. I said some things last week. Now, looking at this particular firm here, had they been doing lousy work, I would immediately raise my hand, no. From what I have read, Mr. John Gilbert and observed, they have done quality work. Look at Overfork Elementary. They've done quality work. Number two, they have stayed within the budget. Okay? You don't have all of these change orders. Change orders can cost additional money from SPLOS. And I can tell you, over the years, we have had some lousy work done with architectural firms and contractors. I mentioned last week where I think it was at Clark Central, and that same firm went to Atlanta with the SPLOS from the school district, bricks falling from the wall. Now, I conclude by saying this: if you have someone doing quality work, why change and take a chance on someone that
never had done any work in this school district. And I mentioned last week with Cedar Shoals High School, oh, change order after change order. And we don't need that. If they stay within the budget and do quality work, why change?
Thank you. Mr. Davis, brief comment?
Yes, please. I spent some time today looking at this. First off, just a little bit of a history. We used to have a construction class in Clark County that was eliminated in 2011. I found out today that there are 35 certified construction programs in our high schools in the state of Georgia, and 14 metal programs. Let me finish. We don't have a construction program right now, and that's out of our purview. Okay, that's done by the superintendent and the staff in terms of what's needed in terms of career development. But I do think, and the reason why I'm voting against this is that we have an opportunity, and this is building on what Dr. Maddox said. We have the opportunity to develop apprenticeship programs for our students in these construction sites. Now, one question that we've been raised is the fact that there are labor laws, workman's comp laws that prevent those under the 18 of being on the construction site. That is currently, the work-based learning program in the state of Georgia is currently attempting to change that, so that 16 and 17-year-olds could go onto a job site. So I say that in the sense of I'm voting against this, not because I don't think this is a good firm, not because I don't think that they do quality work and that they're timely. What I'm seeking, and it doesn't have to, it can be within the contract that has already been awarded. It could be an addendum, which I would be very happy with. Or we have to rebid it, we can rebid it. But I would like the option for this board to, if we're going to distribute tens of millions of dollars to an architectural firm to do the kind of work that they've been doing in the past that we applaud, we want them to have some commitment to our youth. And I think it can be done legally. We have raised this before. This is not the first time that the board has talked about this. And so I want to leave that out there as an option. And so that is one reason that I'm voting against this, not because I disagree with the process, not because I disagree with the philosophy of it, of a 3-year contract with this firm. The fact is, I'm looking for a piece that I think can be in there legally. Another aspect of that is that I'm also looking for a piece that talks about small and minority businesses as subcontractors. I went to the Georgia the Georgia Procurement Manual, Department of Administrative Services State Purchasing Division, and they talk about the fact not only do they encourage small and minority businesses to be subcontracting work with state projects, they actually have a tax supplement, a tax benefit for doing so. And I just feel like that these businesses, because we're taking this firm and we've got a number of major projects on the line for SWA 6, and I would love this firm to be there doing the work and also benefiting our young people who are looking to develop their skills in this area, as well as small and minority businesses who want a little bite at the apple in terms of to prove themselves on the job site. So that's why I'm voting against it this time.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just a couple of things. And I want to come back to this at the end of the meeting, but I just want to thank board members for explaining why they're voting a certain way. I think that is good for the public to hear. I think when there isn't an explanation for why people vote one way or another, that's difficult for the public to figure out. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And maybe you do have this understanding, but we're not discussing contracts, contract for construction companies. This is a process to have an architectural firm on retainer. An architectural firm, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Gilbert to help me explain this, but typically what happens is that an architectural firm sits down with John and his team to draw out the potential model. And then that becomes the parameters for which a construction company then has to work within. But I've heard this evening through your very explicit descriptions as to why you're voting a certain way, which is good. I heard people mention construction, and so I think I just want to make sure we all understand that we're not talking about construction companies, we're talking about an architectural firm. We're good there, John, and I know that's a very broad brush. Typically what happens is that the SPLOST department will say, we need to, well, I think the cosmetology lab is a really good example. So we had a blank group, and we had to engage with an architectural firm to say, so if you were going to construct this to become a cosmetology lab, how would you design it? And then an architectural firm has to have some understanding of construction, but eventually says, this is how we would design it. These are the parameters for a construction company to do its work. And then from that point forward, then Mr. Gilbert uses those plans to engage construction companies to actually do the constructing. So what we're seeking is to have an ongoing relationship with an architectural firm where, and I think we put it in the information, that could serve as a thought partner. If you see a certain room and you want to configure it a different way, you typically start with an architectural firm. I hear people discussing the concept of construction. The other component that I would just say thank you for the feedback on is if the board, I've heard from at least one board member, is being a local firm for whatever service we're seeking, if that is a priority for the board, we can continue to give that strong consideration when we develop RFPs and put that language in, and then when we also evaluate RFP responses.
Mr. Gilbert, did I describe the process of working with an architectural firm accurately?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Davis has been so patient over here.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I appreciate the interesting insights that I'm hearing from other board members. And this is an ongoing discussion, and I think that there are probably two parts to this, obviously. I understand that there's a separation here. We really are simply voting to engage in a pretty much a consulting agreement with this architectural firm to be what you stated in our minutes here. That's fine. My request last week, and still is my request, and was again, how do we, and we don't have to answer this today, but it is something that I want us to look at without violating any laws or trying to make it difficult for people to do business with us. But how do we get companies who are awarded contracts who do not live in this community and are not a part of this community to give back to this community? So under that broad statement around community engagement that's in the RFP, I would like for us to find out how do we work that statement so that we can actually get some benefits not only to they get paid to do the work that they're doing, but I want some skin in the game in terms of the outcome and the impact on our community. It can be set aside, it can be any number of things, but I would like for us to pursue that as one of our policies, if you will, in terms of engaging firms to do business with us. And it becomes a ball that we pass over to the policy committee. It's not something that we can solve with this. We don't want to hold up you doing the work that needs to be done in order to get these projects done, because we don't want to get behind on that, because we have some major construction coming up. So for that reason, I'm willing to support this, but I do not want us to lose sight of the fact that if we have a firm that has a history with us and with large institutions in this community, they are always going to be the best because they have more practice at doing it. And so then, in terms of that community engagement, is there space in that line item to have them then engage local people in the work that they are being contracted to do? That's a request that I have.
And I think you made a great point and I think Dr. Maddox and Mr. Davis, I think you're going to find a lot of commonality with other board members in the concerns and the questions that you've raised. I think the question becomes what's the most efficient way for us to engage with those topics? And Ms. Davis mentioned policy. So if we want to engage with something and codify it as a priority for the board, we have our ability to enact policy is where the rubber hits the road for the board. And so I think you'll find a lot of commonality with some of the sentiments that have been expressed. And the challenge for us will be what's the best way to engage with making those things happen? Is it voting a particular contract down, or is it through a policy process? Is it through one of the other levers that we have as board members? Yes, Dr. Gann.
My question would be, statement and question, I guess, as it relates to policy. Ideally, as we move forward and create RFPs, this would be a part of the conversation. And I'm sort of, just to give some context as far as where I am, I'm really on the fence, because I do understand that this area is outside of my expertise. So I honestly have no idea what is, when something is built, great, if it's society, I can go by what I can see, but it's almost, outside of my expertise. And I think there is a degree to which, we have to trust our colleagues to do the work that they do. There's this other piece, however, with, I think part of it is policy, Jared, and then the other part is where we spend our money. And to me, those two sort of go hand in hand. And I think it is a little bit more comfortable to say, okay, well, in the future, we'll have conversations on RFPs and figure out the language. But then the future there is this risk that the future continues to be the future. My main concern, so I'm on the fence, but my main concern is then how, as we're moving forward, how do we assure that we're not locking people out? All of the people that you were mentioned earlier by Mr. Davis and Dr. Maddox, how do we be sure that we're not locking businesses out while we're, putting money outside of our community? And so I know these are separate projects, but they are in the same context. Like we've talked about two things tonight where we are agreeing on large sums of money, and we have families who are not making a living wage. And so that's my tension. Like I wanna, of course I, trust my colleagues, and then the other part is, well, when is the best time to do it?
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I am with my vote.
And if I could add, maybe add on to what you're saying, how do we have those bigger conversations? And where my head is at, how do we give the folks we've hired to run the school district, how do we, not stand in their way, but run the school district, while at the same time, not forgetting as a board that we want to have these larger conversations? Because you're right, these are conversations that we've been exploring in my couple of years on the board, and I know that have been part of the conversation before that. So how do we, let the administration of the district continue to happen while we have those bigger conversations that are ours. Those are our conversations to have, absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are our conversations to make sure, once we have them and arrive at a consensus, are reflected in the work that the district does. But it is that sort of, push and pull of making sure we have those conversations, while at the same time, the operation of the school district can continue to happen in the way that it needs to happen. Yes, Greg, one more comment, then we can move on to vote.
Okay, again, and I do appreciate Dr. Means' explanation, but I'm still, I guess, like Dr. Gant, this is out of my wheelhouse, but when I read the RFP, I think it talks about, commercial general liability, workers' compensation, the builder's risk, automobile liability. I mean, it sounds like the type of stuff of more than simply, this is a consultant who comes in and says, let me draw up some plans for you. So I don't.
Those are the insurance requirements that you refer to.
Right.
Just the insurance that we expect the
Right.
person to have.
Right. And so I'm until I find out more, and I am cognizant of what Dr. Dyckman said too, in terms of these things tend to get away from us. And so I'm assuming that that this architectural firm will help us draw up the RFPs, and then the RFPs will be out there. They won't do anything with that.
No,
Our staff construct the RFPs. That's the role of the administration staff, to construct the RFPs based on the services that we're seeking.
Why does it talk about subcontractors in this RFP? I don't understand it.
Well, because the architectural firm may be so busy, or it's a clause that allows them to use another firm or an independent boutique shop if they need to. I guess the cosmetology lab is a perfect example. If you're trying to build something that's very specific in terms of its nature, and that's not the architectural firm's expertise, they may go to someone who, in the list of potential projects that we have on for the spring, is a weight room. So there may be a subcontractor that is really an expert in developing weight rooms and athletic areas. So the Lindsay Pope Rifle may want to go and use a subcontractor. That's an example of using that clause.
I have a quick question though, clarification before we vote. If this is not approved, this particular agreement is for retainer, right? Like having the firm on retainer. So if it's not approved, does that still mean that we will work with, it's still within our rights to work with, or the district's right to work with the same architectural firm, right? It just means that it's not gonna be like an ongoing relationship, but the district will still have the autonomy to choose that, okay, well, here's a project and we want this same firm to do it, here's another project, we want this.
It's over $80,000, it has to go on the RFP. And so we'll get to go out over and over.
So what would happen if this is rejected this evening? Every project that meets that threshold would have to come before you anyway. And we would have to run an RFP process for each one of those projects.
Each individual project that was listed on the information.
I don't know how many of those projects will be over $80,000.
Oh, okay.
Or not. But any engagement or project with Lindsay Pope that's over $80,000, we would have to put out an RFP process, receive all the responses, weight them, and then bring them forward. Versus having the ability to have Lindsay Pope on retainer, and as projects emerge, then you pick up the phone, you talk to the architectural firm, and you make plans.
Okay, and then the retainer is for, I think, I've gotten my numbers confused, but it's for a certain amount of time, length of time, or number of projects?
Excuse me?
Is the retainer, this agreement is for a certain length of time or a certain number of projects?
So the retainer would be for, very similar to what you heard from Mr. Pruitt in terms of, it is based on until we decide that this is not a good relationship
I see,
anymore.
okay.
So that's the length of it. And if you know, the language is different, right? I mean, so we talked about having some type of cap for legal services. Here, we are discussing retainer, right? And as Mr. Worley said, we've been with this firm for a while. I think Mr. Gilbert wanted to outline that typically it's a 90-day process to place a RFP out for bid, receive responses, weight it, and then bring it before the board. And so we would just have to embed a 90-day runway just for an RFP process for each project. And when you embed the 90 days, and in some cases, there are other factors that Mr. Gilbert and his team has to deal with, such as rain, for example. So you combine rain with the 90-day period for putting out to bid architectural services. That's what we were trying to say in the information we sent over today. There's a higher probability that we won't make deadlines to start the school year without this type of retainer service.
Right. Thank you. Great conversation.
Just a very simple question.
Thank you.
Because I've heard dollar values kind of mentioned in large amounts. That's not actually stipulated here in this agreement in terms of how much money there is. Because my personal feeling is that the architects don't get the huge chunk of money from what I know. So is there a ballpark figure for this in terms of money, or is it open?
They have set percentages based on cost of construction.
Right.
So they're kind of locking in some rates.
Right.
For us to be on the tank.
But yeah, I think you're right. Out the door, there's no commitment to it is going to be, the retainer concept is, as they do work, we are billed at certain rates, and which can terminate.
Can I ask one more clarification?
Of course, yes.
Does this preclude, would this kind of arrangement preclude us from engaging with a different architect if there was a particular project that was very specialized? Or do we know?
I don't know. I would have to go back into the contract and see if there's a exclusive relationship. We can find that out.
Great.
Well, that could be a stipulation in this retainer contract that we can't do, right?
I don't want to make any.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I don't want to try to
Yeah, I'm good.
suspect what's in the contract, but we'll find out and get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to approve this acceptance of the contract, the architectural firm on retainer. All in favor? Any opposed? 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 opposed, 2, 4, 3, 4. So the motion fails. Moving on then, we have a number 4, but I don't believe there's anything there. Is that right, Ms. Monica? New agenda item? That's fine.
Yes.
Item N, we have received a list of personnel recommendations, an ongoing list of recommendations that on the personnel list for us to approve. Is there a motion on the personnel recommendations?
Yes. I move that we approve them.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Second by Mr. Worthy. And again, for new board members, we don't dive into the particulars of any individuals in open session, or any conversation about personnel generally. But if there are questions specifically about what we're doing at this moment, I'd be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and call for a vote.
Or we're going to executive session prior to the vote.
And so to that comment, Ms. Davis and board members and for the public, I've shared with the board in the past that unless there is some serious situation, if there is a question regarding personnel, we should be transparent and have that conversation in public. I think sometimes the public wonders why are we going into executive session to discuss personnel issues, and typically that spirals into a space where we're kind of identifying certain components, and so typically it is the council highlight to give board members is that if you have a question prior to the board meeting about a personnel issue, please give me a call. And we can either talk on the phone or we can talk in person. But to leverage the executive session clauses, I mean, obviously there may be some items that require that conversation, but that's been my standing counsel to board members.
And I'm trying to find this a general conversation, but we would never talk about individuals in a public forum because of privacy laws, would we not? Am I incorrect?
Well, that's why I'm suggesting board members should communicate with staff prior to the board meeting, right?
Okay.
So if you have an individual question about an individual on the list, that we welcome those questions, but let's have that discussion so that we can give you the information. So that's my answer.
Thank you. It's good context.
I thought I had been wrong all these years. I'm like, oh.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the personal recommendations. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And that brings us to the adjournment of our meeting. A motion? Moved by Ms. Davis to adjourn, second. Moved by Dr. Knox, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's my thing.